Sitting right in front of me and actually on my wrist at the moment are the new Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean Gen 4s. In today's video, we're going to be covering everything that you need to know, the specs, the history, the cool new upgrades, and also we're going to be comparing this to the previous generation of the Planet Ocean. And finally, we're going to be discussing whether this is the best professional dive watch that you can buy now when it comes to specs. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always. And I've been wearing this watch now for around about a week. I've been getting to grips with it. I didn't want to launch a video willy-nilly without really wearing and understanding this watch. So let's begin with the history. The Planet Ocean now is 20 years old. This is the 20th anniversary of the Planet Ocean, hence why they're releasing the Gen 4s. The original Planet Ocean was released back in 2005, and since 2005, there's been some huge upgrades and changes. The Planet Ocean 600 meters was kind of released as a filler. It was kind of released to bridge the gap between the 300 meter Omega Seamaster and the Ploprof. It was their professional diving watch that most divers went for. If you wanted aesthetics and the look of a diving watch, you went for the 300 meters, a little bit like me and the King, because I'm not really a diver, but if you were a genuine diver that wanted to use this watch for its tool purpose, you'd go for the Planet Ocean. Now, a question I get asked a lot is, why do diving watches use orange? Why is that such a prevalent color when it comes to diving watches? And well, the answer is actually quite interesting. Orange was used because it was historically believed to be the most visible color underwater. It's due to its high contrast with blue, green, and surroundings of the ocean. So essentially, they wanted the most visible color to be viewed underwater, hence why a lot of diving watches went with orange, including the kind of primary color to the Planet Ocean. Now, there are 7 new variants when it comes to these watches, but there's 3 new heads of the watches, if you want to say that. You have a blue bezel, a black bezel, and also an orange bezel. These new watches come in at 42 millimeters in diameter, 13.79 millimeters in thickness, and 47.5 millimeters lug to lug. Now, I know that we're going to compare this to the previous generation in a second, but I just want to say, before we even move on to that, to have a 600 meter water resistance in a 42 mil case with a 13.79 millimeter thickness is insane. Absolute insanity. In fact, I don't actually know any other watch brands that have had that depth of water resistance with such pleasant specs. The crystal on these models is flat sapphire crystal glass with anti-reflective treatment on both sides, and I think that's partially contributed to that kind of thinner case, if you want to call it that. It's of course water resistant to 600 meters with the bracelet. This watch comes in at 177 grams, and the movement on this watch is the Omega Caliber 8912. This is an entirely self-winding movement with a coaxial escapement. It's certified by Master Chronometer, approved by METAS, and resistant to magnetic fields reaching 15,000 Gauss with a 60-hour power reserve. Now, for those of you with a keen eye, you might notice that this is actually exactly the same movement that was used on the Ultra Deep. So it's not a brand new movement for these watches, but they have taken the Ultra Deep movement and put it in to the new Planet Oceans. Now, interestingly, these watches are made out of stainless steel, but the inner disc is actually in titanium. And that inner ring allows the watch to keep its water resistance in the smaller case size. And this is actually something that Omega learned when they sent the Ultra Deep down the Mariana Trench. And I love the way that they've kind of taken their learnings from the Ultra Deep and put it into the new Planet Oceans. Also, on the subject of titanium, when you flip these watches round to the case back, you'll actually be able to see that the case backs are in grade 5 titanium. It's interesting, guys. You can always see what watch I'm biased and favor based on the one that I actually put on when something like this happens. And I do think the orange is just stunning. But let me know what you guys think in the comments of these watches. Do you prefer the orange, the black, or the blue? What are you guys thinking? Also, why haven't they brought out a white dial yet? Why wouldn't they do that? Can you not think this would look so cool with a white dial? Maybe they're saving that for later. By the way, if you do enjoy these videos, please hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it, and it helps us so much more than you know. So thank you. And now we get to the major changes, which is where we're going to cover a lot more of the design elements of this watch. So the first major change has to be the helium escape valve. It's gone. There's no helium escape valve. And as a Seamaster lover, as the guy that kind of branded the Omega Seamaster as the king, I'm kind of unsure how I feel about this. It's something that the community has been asking for such a long time, but I've always been team helium escape valve. And the reason being is that it gives the Seamaster range a signature look. If you were to just look at the silhouette of a watch, like a Rolex Submariner, you're always going to be able to tell it's a Rolex Submariner because it has that unique kind of outline. And that's what the Omega Seamasters had with the helium escape valve, because as soon as you saw that valve, you knew it was an Omega Seamaster, whether it be a Planet Ocean or a 300 meters, it doesn't matter. You still knew it was a Seamaster. But without this, although the proportions might seem more attractive because it doesn't spread out on the wrist as much, I feel like they might have lost something. I feel like, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I feel that they just might have lost a little touch of their DNA. With that said, the other changes that they've made are definitely reminiscent of past Seamaster or watches within Omega's arsenal. For example, the bracelet. The bracelet on this watch is an integrated bracelet. It looks so much more 70s inspired. In fact, the whole watch looks a lot more 70s-esque. It's sharper, it's cleaner, it has so much more polished metal on there, and actually it's reminiscent of the Baby Proploff reference 166.0251. I can see a huge amount of similarities between this aesthetic and that old model. And I do like the fact that they've taken real inspiration from their history. The dial on these watches is smaller. It of course still has a ceramic bezel, and actually the bezel clicks. Listen to this, listen to this. Oh, that's smooth. It's really good. I have to say, I think watch guys have kind of a thing for bezel clicks because it makes so much of a difference, right? Especially when you play with your watch and have ADHD like me. And it's really prevalent click. It's really, really nice. These watches all have super, super bright lume, which you would expect from an Omega Planet Ocean because obviously you need to read it at the depths. They all have matte black dials, and the numerals on these models are just slightly different. I mean, the Planet Ocean Orange has orange numerals, whereas the black has silver numerals, and the blue has more white-filled numerals. Now, something I did notice about this watch that is probably one of the only cons I could find is on the bracelet, at the back of the bracelet, you do have a highly polished deployant clasp. Now that deployant clasp is brilliant. It works perfectly well. It has micro adjustments. It's everything that you need on an Omega watch. But that clasp at the bottom is going to get battered. It's going to get bruised. It's going to get scratched, especially because polished metal just tends to show scratches that little bit more than brushed. So like if you're wearing this in the office and you're dragging your mouse around, if it's in your left hand or right hand, whatever, it's going to get scratched on the table. And I do think that as a tool watch, as a doing watch, that shouldn't really be the case. With that said, what you could do is do what I've done and wear the rubber strap. And the rubber straps on these models, moving on to that, are absolutely stunning. They're so comfortable, so wearable, and actually so much nicer than a lot of the rubber straps that I've seen prior or on the other models. I love how they're integrated with the head of that watch. It gives it a really nice look. The deployant clasp at the bottom of this watch, again, is super, super easy to use and super, super durable. It feels secure, it feels quality, it feels premium. Okay, so let's just compare some of these specs to the previous version of the Planet Ocean now. So when we look at the previous version of the Planet Ocean, we can see that it comes in at 43.5 millimeters. So there, you've shaved 1.5 millimeters off. Now, I know for non-watch people or people that are first getting into the industry, that doesn't seem like much. Actually, it seems very minimal. But when it comes to expensive watches, when it comes to tool watches, that 1.5 millimeters makes all the difference. But even more than that, and the spec that I obsess over even more than that, has to be the thickness. So in the previous version, the thickness came in at 16.09 millimeters. That difference is insane. And as a result of Omega being able to thin that down, figuring out how to thin that down but keep all the water resistance, you get a watch that is so much more palatable to the masses. I have actually said this before. Whenever I look at a Planet Ocean, normally I picture a big burly man. And actually on the Into the Mind podcast, we had a guy called Brian Wood in. He fought in the Battle of Danny Boy. He's a really, really cool military guy who does a bunch of crazy stuff. If you want to listen to that podcast, it's on the Into the Mind podcast, which is my personal podcast. And he wore a Planet Ocean because the Planet Ocean is the doer's tool watch. Whereas little old me, I wore a Seamaster because I like the look, but I didn't necessarily need the specs. But now you don't have to be big and burly. I mean, I have 6.5-inch wrists and this wears really nicely, especially I have to say with the rubber strap. I think my favorite variant of this model was definitely be the orange with the orange rubber strap. Super cool. The previous version, the Gen 3, came in at 49mm lug to lug, but this one has been reduced, again, as we covered at the start, to 47.5mm. The specs in general, guys, are just so much more wearable. Then we get to the big one, which is the glass. The glass on the previous version was actually domed, whereas this glass, again, as I mentioned before, is flat. And that just adds to the more thin, wearable aesthetic of this watch. Now, if you were to get the stainless steel variant of this watch, it would come in at £8,000. Whereas if you were to get the rubber strap variant of this watch, it comes in at £7,200. And I have to say this, and I'm gonna get kind of slaughtered in the comments for saying this, and I'd love to know your opinion on this. I genuinely feel that as a professional diving watch, this is the best package you could ask for. It's versatile, it's got all the specs that you need, the design is epic. It's just one of the best packages that Omega have ever put together in terms of the balance of specs versus versatility. Because sometimes if you're focusing purely on specs, you lose the versatility. Look at the Ultra Deep. I mean, it's great, it does it, but it's not as versatile. Whereas this sits really nicely in between. But enough about what I think of these models. Let me know what you guys think of these models in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you had enjoyed, please hit that subscribe button or follow our Instagram at Chisholm Hunter Watches or my Instagram at HB Lifelens or the Instamind Podcast, which is our very own podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.